Okay, so once again, thank you all for joining us today. This is Bikewalk KC's 2024 policy platform, a look at our policy and advocacy priorities for the new year. So let's get into it. So what you're seeing here is the outline. We will be giving a explanation of our work in KCMO, then moving to KCK, looking at some of the regional and suburbs we'll be working in, shifting to statewide efforts in both Kansas and Missouri, and then rounding things out with our federal and national efforts. As Liz said, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we will try to get through all of them before the hour is up. So before we get into the discussion of the policy platform, I did want to take a moment to give an overview of Bikewalk KC as an organization. The mission of Bikewalk KC is to redefine our streets as places for people to build a culture of active living. In other words, as Amy has been so good at putting it, you shouldn't need to drive in order to thrive in our region. And so we work to achieve this through 5 primary areas of focus. First is advocacy. So we advocate for a better built environment for people who want or need to walk, cycle, roll, and more. And that means speaking up for the policies, plans, and projects which make these forms easier and more reliable throughout the metro. Education, we have one of the largest education programs of our kind in the country, and we work to teach children and adults how to safely walk and ride, maintain their bikes, and more. We also have a community planner on staff who works to provide technical assistance to municipalities and other stakeholders working on planning and projects that will bring those important changes to the built environment. As an offshoot of that, Bikewalk KC relies on data collection to tell a story and provide support to our planning and advocacy efforts, best encapsulated within our community dashboard. Finally, we run the area's bike share program. So we have rolled out, no pun intended, electric assist bikes to give riders a boost in more places. All of our bikes are now dockless, meaning that you don't need to return them to a kiosk in the ride, but you do need to park it out of the right of way so it doesn't block the sidewalk. So with that, let's jump into it, and we're going to get going with Kansas City, Missouri, where our primary focus will be on planning efforts and safety improvements. So first up is the walkability plan. So the current walkability plan is old. It dates back to 2003 and is long overdue for an update. This is especially true given that there are new funding opportunities for improving sidewalks, i.e. GO bonds, and new documents which didn't exist in 2003, such as the Climate Protection and Resiliency Plan. So a big part of improving walkability is about creating more safe routes to school, basically making it safer and easier for students, parents, teachers to walk to and bike to school. Updating the walkability plan could open the door to developing a plan for this as well. Bikewalk KC has already begun having conversations with elected officials and staff about this, including through the budget process. We're still working on some things behind the scenes, but our hope is to be able to share more about where those developments are going later this spring. Another big priority for Bikewalk KC in 2024 is the continued implementation of Vision Zero. So a quick recap. The KCMO City Council adopted the Vision Zero Action Plan in 2022 as a guide to eliminate traffic fatalities and serious injuries by the year 2030. It's an ambitious goal, but one that's needed to address the epidemic of traffic violence, one which disproportionately harms vulnerable road users and Black and brown Kansas Cityans. To accomplish this goal, the action plan calls for implementing measures which make our streets safer for pedestrians, people with disabilities, cyclists, transit users, and drivers. That means more traffic calming projects, safe crossings, and protected bike lanes or PBLs. The focus of much of these efforts will be on the city's high injury network, which identifies the most dangerous streets and intersections in the city. Though they make up just 12% of the city's streets overall, the HIN produces 68% of crashes, serious injuries, and fatalities. So to help make Vision Zero a reality, we need more funding. To that end, Bikewalk KC is pushing for increased funding in the city budget process. What is currently proposed is about $4 million, which would be a $3 million increase over 2023. We're also working with city staff to identify and pursue federal funding opportunities, including the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Next up for KCMO, we have public restrooms. So why is Bike Walk KC advocating for more public restrooms? Simply put, we see public restroom access as a transportation issue. We've spoken about this in the past, but the short version is that if you don't have access to a restroom, you're less likely to use walking and biking as a form of transportation. A lack of restrooms also makes our city less friendly for a number of vulnerable populations, including people experiencing houselessness, people living with disabilities, and parents with small children, like myself. Bike Walk KC has begun to study this issue a bit more. One step we took was to look at the location of tickets for public urination. The idea is to try to determine where demand could be and see if there is overlap with other key locations, such as bus stops. We've begun to share this information with staff at City Hall and other community leaders. All of this work is meant to lay the foundation for a bigger goal, pushing city leaders to develop a public restroom plan. The plan would help to guide the deployment of more public restrooms and align with efforts to create a safer, more accessible active transportation network. Additionally, we still have our eye on safety improvements for Meyer Boulevard. So we made a number of recommendations in our walk audit report to help improve the pedestrian experience, including slowing down speeding drivers, working to address street harassment, and the expansion of small-scale amenities. We will work with city staff to identify ways to bring about those improvements over the course of 2024. The most immediate improvement on the table is a proposed crosswalk in front of the Kaufman School. City leaders have a basic plan put together, but they're doing additional outreach to get feedback. And Bike Walk KC will work to make sure stakeholders along the corridor are kept in the loop. We know that neither of these steps alone will be enough, but we see this as the first steps in a long-term effort. Getting these things done makes it easier to push for the bigger, harder changes to make Myers safer for pedestrians, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable road users. The last big item I want to highlight for KCMO is our work on Troost Avenue. Last October, Michelle Dunmore was struck and killed as she walked to a bus stop on Troost Avenue. She was part of an unfortunate trend on Kansas City streets. Black users are twice as likely to die from traffic violence as their white counterparts. Her daughter, Asia, pictured here, says that she and her family have been devastated by the crash, and they want to see the city do something about it. Asia is not alone. We've spoken with area residents, neighborhood leaders, and school officials along the segment of Troost south of 75th Street. They're tired of the speeding, the reckless behavior, and the resulting crashes that injure and kill people. Bike Walk KC has begun working with those stakeholders to bring their concerns to city leaders and staff. City Hall has indicated that they intend to develop a safety plan for the corridor, and we anticipate an initial version of that plan will be released sometime in the spring. From there, it will be a matter of working to bring changes from the paper to the pavement. So now that we're done with KCMO, let's jump across state line and look at what's happening in Kansas City, Kansas. And this is primarily moving that part of the region towards Vision Zero. Our main priority in KCK will be around the work to develop a Vision Zero safety plan. So the Vision Zero safety plan is meant to build off of other key transportation documents for the unified government, perhaps most importantly, the GODOT Strategic Mobility Plan. It's also timely because it builds upon work done by KDOT to identify a statewide high injury network. In the course of these efforts, KCK was identified as one of the 5 most dangerous areas of the state for vulnerable road users. The development of this plan will present additional opportunities for engagement with members of the public and community leaders. But perhaps more than anywhere else in the region, what we have seen in KCK is that it is a place where we work with people who have coalition and planning fatigue. Simply put, they have been asked to participate in coalitions so many times with little to show for it that they are becoming disinterested in advocacy altogether. The best way to fix this is to push for concrete projects, no pun intended, and tangible changes to the built environment. That's what Bike Walk KC will push for as we support the development of this plan. Next, we're looking at the regional scale. So thinking about expanding multimodal choice, additional coalition building, and more. The first big regional item we want to highlight is our work to build a Transportation for All coalition. To help us do this work, Bikewalk KC was fortunate to receive funding from the Equitable Transportation Fund. The work is meant to better understand how the shortcomings of our transportation system hinder people and the organizations working to serve those populations. We spent much of the last couple of months connecting with partner organizations that include social service agencies, disability rights groups, medical centers, and more. The main goals of this coalition are twofold. First, a policy platform, and second, data analysis. The policy platform will be developed by our partners and will likely identify key actions to take at the local, county, and state levels. On the second point of data analysis, we see this as an opportunity to listen to and elevate the voices of people experiencing the shortcomings of our transportation system. To do that, we're working with Porchlight Insights to develop a survey for partner organizations and identifying potential opportunities for listening sessions with key stakeholders. Okay, e-bike rebates and expanded bike share. Another big item we wanted to mention is our work in this area. So a relatively recent phenomenon we've seen appear in other parts of the country is what's known as an e-bike rebate program. The idea essentially goes like this. Someone goes to purchase an e-bike and an entity helps to pay for a portion of the e-bike. The success of these programs, especially in places like Denver, is shifting mode share and getting people to drive less has brought considerable attention to the idea as a means of lowering transportation emissions. As a result, Bikewalk KC has been working with staff at the Mid-America Regional Council to develop a proposal to fund a regional e-bike rebate program here. We hope to know more about where things stand with that proposal later this year. In addition to the rebates, we're also working with MARC to expand bike share. The reasons for this are many, but there are a few reasons I want to highlight here. First, we need more e-bikes to meet increasing demand. Second, it's integral to lowering our carbon emissions. And third, more e-bikes are part of the increased transportation options needed for the enormous influx of people expected for the World Cup in 2026. There's a few more regional priorities to mention before we move on. First, with regional transit funding. The region's transit system is not meeting the needs of the people who need it most, and that reality won't change until we change the funding equation. To that end, Bikewalk KC is working with organizations like KC Regional Transit Alliance, Sunrise Movement KC, and others to build the case for a regional transit funding model. A considerable amount of work is happening behind the scenes at the moment, but we hope to share more throughout the course of 2024. Additionally, one of the new grant opportunities created by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. The grant pays for both planning and implementation efforts designed to create safer streets for everyone, especially people who walk, roll, bike, or use public transit. Our region has been especially fortunate. In the last round of funding, 10 jurisdictions received some sort of funding. This will create opportunities for advocates to get involved in local efforts to create plans and projects, and we're already working to connect with local champions and government officials. Finally, the tragic reality of our current transportation system is that it produces traffic violence, which kills or forever alters the lives of innocent people. A national group has formed called Families for Safe Streets. They provide support to the loved ones of people killed, connect them with other families, and give them the space necessary to mobilize and advocate for change. A number of chapters have sprouted up across the country, and Bikewalk KC is currently exploring ways to hopefully bring a chapter to the Kansas City region. So, moving on from the regional part, let's shift gears and look at suburban communities where the majority of our focus will be with bike parking and policy changes. One priority where we see a great deal of opportunity is with bike parking, and this is manifesting for different reasons in different communities. In Mission, thanks to the efforts of local champions like Josh Speed, Emily Randall, and our board member Mary Estrada, Mission developed and adopted an updated comprehensive plan which can help them to take their active transportation components to the next level. This includes more bike parking to accommodate a forthcoming expansion of bike share into that community. North Kansas City has quietly become a leader in the region on bike elements as well. Between the Armor Road Complete Streets project, bike share offerings, and a dedicated bike lane sweeper, NKC has much to offer. One area where they can build on this is with bike parking policy, and we'll be working with staff and city leaders to identify ways to strengthen this element. Finally, Roland Park has made inroads, no pun intended, on active transportation primarily through their efforts to develop and adopt a strong complete streets policy. One of the first implementation steps as part of that is to expand amenities related to active transportation, which also includes bike parking. Another area where we want to focus our efforts this year is with the Johnson County CARS program, especially as it relates to Vision Zero. So in short, the CARS program provides funds to the cities of Johnson County to construct and maintain their major arterials. Each year, the cities submit a 5-year road improvement plan to Johnson County. The county and city share costs related to various elements of a given road project, including construction, design, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation. Under the program, there is limited consideration for bike ped elements. Multimodal options are considered eligible as a type of route enhancement, but there's little explanation for how that is weighed compared to other eligible types of projects. Johnson County has increased incentive to create a better system. The county recently received federal funding from the SS4A program to develop a comprehensive safety action plan for the unincorporated parts of the county. But we also want to use this as an opportunity to shape the conversation about the CARS program as well. One more area in the suburbs I want to highlight is our work in Shawnee. Our work to improve bike ped elements began mostly with local champion Sarah Arundale. Sarah was unnecessarily stopped by police while taking her children to school on an e-bike. Conversations with others, such as the chair of the Shawnee Bicycle Committee, Christian Sinclair, made it clear that more work needed to be done in this part of the region. There's additional opportunities in Shawnee on changes at City Hall. Elections in November led to turnover, which means we have a more bike-friendly city council. We're working to schedule meetings with new and existing council members to begin discussing policy and project priorities. And while there are obvious needs, such as installing more sidewalks and creating more safe routes to school, there's also a need to address how the local police department enforces rules and regulations around bicycling. We've had some conversations with traffic safety officers, and we hope to build on that in the months ahead. So now we can take a step back and look kind of at the statewide elements, looking at planning and policy opportunities in Jefferson City and Topeka. In the Sunflower State, our primary objectives build off of our work to get the Kansas Active Transportation Plan updated. They include the statewide complete streets policy. So one of the key implementation steps identified in the Active Transportation Plan is for KDOT to develop a complete streets program that, quote, applies to new construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, and resurfacing of existing KDOT roadways, city linkages, and local roads, unquote. The first step in making that program a reality is creating a statewide policy. Bikewalk KC has been in contact with KDOT staff about this and hope to share updates on how members of the public can get involved later this year. Additionally, Bikewalk KC has been fortunate to work with other active transportation advocates across the state, especially Bikewalk Wichita, the Topeka Community Cycle Project, and Bikewalk MHK in Manhattan. We have wanted to find a way to formalize the coalition in a way that's similar to Missourians for Responsible Transportation, and we're hoping to take another step towards making that a reality in 2024. In the Show Me State, our primary objectives remain much the same. First, Missouri remains one of a shrinking handful of states without any sort of statewide active transportation plan. Lacking this vital document means Missouri has no cohesive vision for supporting people who walk, roll, bike, and or use public transportation in the state and continues to push us in the wrong direction on crashes, serious injuries, and fatalities. Bikewalk KC is working with our partners to identify ways to push MoDOT to finally take action on this important issue. Additionally, Bikewalk KC is part of a statewide coalition known as Missourians for Responsible Transportation. Working with other transportation advocacy organizations across the state, we're working on statewide issues and providing technical assistance to smaller rural communities. These are parts of the state that want to improve multimodal options, but often lack the resources necessary to do it. With support from agencies like the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, we will continue to provide planning and policy assistance to folks in these areas. So to round things out, let's look at the federal and national landscape and the new opportunities on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. There are a number of federal bills we're watching and supporting this year. First, e-bike charging. So lost in the push to deploy electric vehicle charging infrastructure is the need for electric bicycle charging infrastructure and how it can work with existing bike share systems. Our very own Ride KC Bike Share Director, Eric Vaughn, provided insights to the League of American Bicyclists, which informed language in the legislation introduced earlier this year, the E-Bike Share Act, H.R. 6659. Major Taylor. So Major Taylor is a highly revered figure in the bicycling community. Around the turn of the 20th century, Taylor made a name for himself by winning various competitions and setting records in the growing sport of professional cycling. Unfortunately, he suffered a great deal from racial discrimination within and beyond the sport and ultimately died penniless in 1932. The Congressional Gold Medal is one of the highest civilian awards in the United States, and awarding it posthumously to Taylor would give him the proper recognition for all of his efforts. Finally, Sarah DeBink Langenkamp was a diplomat who was evacuated from Ukraine at the start of the war there in 2022. Unfortunately, Sarah was killed while riding a bike in Bethesda, Maryland, several weeks after returning to the States. The legislation named in her honor will make it easier for states to use funding from the Highway Safety Improvement Program to support projects which make it safer and easier for people to walk and bike. There are a few more pieces of legislation we'll be watching as well. First, the Building Safer Streets Act does a lot to strengthen FHWA requirements about multimodal transportation. It includes better guidance and recommendations on bike ped projects and stronger multimodal elements for updating federal documents such as the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD. Additionally, a major challenge with transit funding at the federal level is that it can only be used for capital elements. It can't be used on operations or maintenance. The bill, the Stronger Communities Through Better Transit Act, or HR 7039, would change that rule by authorizing $20 billion a year in federal matching funds for operating expenses associated with improving transportation service and increasing transit ridership. And finally, with the Complete Streets Act, this bill has been introduced in the past couple of years, and a new version of it has been introduced this year as well. In short, the bill would create a new federally funded Complete Streets program, allow jurisdictions to use those funds for multimodal projects, and direct US DOT to require stronger design standards for multimodal elements on federally funded transportation projects. This legislation hasn't received a bill number yet. The other key national element we're focusing on this year is our work with the REAMP partnership. So the mission of the REAMP network is to set collective strategy and enable collaboration on climate solutions throughout the Midwest. Their stated North Star goal is to equitably eliminate greenhouse gas emissions in the Midwest by 2050. So one of the subgroups within the network focuses on transportation issues. Participating in this group has already enabled us to forge new partnerships with multimodal transportation advocates in states such as Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Some of them I think are on the call today. Hello. That work has also helped us to bring in new funding for local pedestrian efforts and is helping us to advocate for federal legislation, including some of the previously mentioned bills. So, before we go to questions, I wanted to highlight some of the ways you can get involved. First, the easiest way to stay informed about our advocacy efforts is to sign up for our advocacy alerts through our mailing list. Whenever there's a survey, a public meeting, or key legislation to speak up for at your city hall, we will let you know. Additionally, part of the reason why decision makers don't always consider active transportation a priority is because people don't tell them to make it a priority. Meeting your elected officials and staff, telling them you want those improvements and doing it consistently is a critical part of good advocacy. Not sure how to do it? Check out our Advocacy 104 training on building relationships with electeds and staffs for tips. Finally, as we often say, advocacy is a team sport. Nothing happens because of me, it happens because of we. The first big step in building a top-tier advocacy roster is to inform your friends and neighbors. Talk to them about the issues they see with the built environment when it comes to active transportation and start thinking together about how you can push for improvements. So with that, I want to thank you. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention is that we are very, very fortunate to have Veronica Davis coming to Kansas City on April 23rd. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Veronica is a planner and engineer by trade. She recently worked at the Houston Department of Public Works and Wastewater Management and is now an author who has written a fantastic book entitled Inclusive Transportation, a Manifesto for Repairing Divided Communities. Veronica will be coming to Kansas City on Tuesday, April 23rd, for an event to discuss her book, as well as how we can work to address transportation inequities in the Kansas City region. And we would love to have each and every one of you join us for that as well. So I'm pretty sure Liz has probably dropped the link for that in the chat. So we would love to see you there. Now, with that being said, I want to thank you all again for your time, and I'm going to turn off share and we can get to answering some of y'all's questions.
Thank you, Michael. That was excellent. I feel like we went over a lot of stuff today. So I'm going to talk slowly because we still have plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to get started slowly so that people have some time to add those questions to the chat if they have some. To start us off, Michael, if you could go back to the e-bike charging bill that you mentioned. Mary asked if that is a bill that is currently being reviewed. Do you know the status on that?
The bill has been introduced, and the thing with Congress is that it's a much, much slower process on the Hill than it is at City Hall or even in Topeka or Jefferson City. Our understanding is that it hasn't been referred to a committee, which would be the next step in the process. So right now, it's just being considered, but our hope is that we can definitely get some movement on it this year. So yeah, thank you for that question, Mary.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I know we talk at Bike Walk about how and Michael, I think that you have a much more elegant way of saying this, but something about like the threshold for making change, it's so low at a municipal level. You talked about going to the budget hearings for Kansas City, Missouri, and when 20 people show up to a budget hearing for a town of, I don't know, do we have 1 million people in Kansas City, Missouri? 500,000. So if 20 people show up to a budget hearing to help make decisions for a city of 500,000, that means that those 20 people have an enormous opportunity, right? To be a really outsized influence. So we don't have that kind of opportunity in Congress. So it takes a little longer to get things done, right?
Right. So yes, Liz, you are absolutely right. So when you're thinking about, trying to get things done at your local city hall, you're only trying to convince about 7 people, and 20 people sending an email about a sidewalk or a crosswalk really will get their attention. When you're talking about Congress, by contrast, you're talking about tens of thousands of people reaching out to each of their Congress members. So in general, each member of Congress is representing about 700,000 people um, in most instances, and that's just with the House. That's not thinking about the 2 folks you have in the Senate. So it is absolutely worth reaching out to them about these pieces of legislation, but it's also going to take a lot more people to move the needle, especially if you're in more conservative states. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to look at my list here of the questions that we received when folks registered. So, can we talk a little bit about how land use and transportation policy are connected?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So when we talk about land use and transportation, much of what has made our transportation landscape um, difficult for people who are outside of a car to navigate is sprawl. Requirements around building single-use homes, parking requirements, all of those things add up in a way that pushes developments, housing, schools and other resources further away from each other. And as a result, that makes it harder for you to be able to use walking or biking or transit as a form of transportation. And so that has implications for the economy, for public health, for sustainability, a whole host of things. And so, in advocating for transportation policy changes, it is important for an organization like Bike Walk KC to also consider and advocate around land use as well. What we typically do that up to this point has been through comprehensive plans. You may remember that I mentioned Mission's comprehensive plan. The reason those comprehensive plans are so important is because they are one of the key documents that inform how a city is expected to grow and develop, sometimes for decades. And that's one of the key ways that individuals like you can get involved with the process and speak up for better land use policies, things like mixed use development, accessory dwelling units, getting rid of parking minimums for new developments. These are all land use related elements that also contribute to making it easier for transportation options beyond driving to flourish.
I think the way you talk about transportation and land use, it really we've got a bigger picture here, right, than just walking and biking. So when we talk about advocating for all of these different ideas, we're really like, it's not like we aren't the housing people, but we're friends with the people who are housing people.
Mhm.
And the housing people, they're not like the bike walk folks, but together, right, we're achieving similar goals,
Mhm.
because when we talk about transportation, it's not just about sidewalks or bike lanes. And when we talk about housing, it's not just about houses,
Yeah.
similar to talking about, as you mentioned, having neighborhood schools that kids can actually walk to. Um, all of these things are connected. And so it's important for Bike Walk, like us as an organization, but it's also important for individual residents or advocates to be making those connections with their neighbors uh, uh, whose like real passion project, right, may not
Mhm.
be bike lanes.
Right.
Um, it's a
So
good idea to make friends with folks who have all kinds of passion projects for a brighter future of some kind for Kansas City.
yes, well, so you're absolutely right, and one thing that I did want to highlight is that as part of our work with REAMP, we have been working to develop curriculum for a transportation academy. So for folks who are interested in taking a deep dive into some of the transportation, land use, planning elements, especially as it relates to Kansas City's region, we will have more information about that course, which you would all be invited to participate in later this year as well. So if you're not already signed up for the mailing list, that's another reason to sign up, because that will be one of the first ways that we tell people about this new education opportunity for advocates in waiting.
So if you are ready to nerd out in a big way, join us because we want to nerd out with you. Michael mentioned the advocacy trainings. If you did not participate in those the first time we did them live through Zoom, I posted a link to our YouTube channel, and you can go watch. I think we've got Advocacy 101 through Advocacy 104, right?
Yes.
And that's a good introduction. And then the Transportation Academy is going to get real deep.
Absolutely.
We've got another question from Mary. She says, is the Ride KC bike share and or bike parking data publicly available? I am a software engineer and would love to play around with any data or APIs if we have any.
Most of the data that we have for Ride KC Bike available to the public is available through our community dashboard. We have a pretty considerable amount of bike share data there. If you're looking for something more specific, feel free to send us an email, and we're happy to connect you with our bike share director, Eric Vaughn, and he'd probably be able to help you.
Yes. And I will make a note to myself to include the bike share annual report when I send out this follow-up email. And that will have some more information in it as well that you might find really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has been a wild couple of years for bike share. So we launched the e-bikes in 2019 was the first year that we started those. And Kansas City is so hilly. As a person who rode an acoustic bike for a really long time, and I still like, my personal bike is an acoustic bike, as I like to call them. But the e-bike is a game changer. It is incredible.
Absolutely.
It is people who we hear all the time from bike share riders that if they had not been riding a bike share bike, they would have been driving alone in their car. And we love every bike share story, but that is the big thing, is that every person on a bike share bike is a person who is not driving alone. And that means that they are part of the change, right? That's incredible. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I fully agree with Gail's comment here. I have a much closer commute now, but yeah, it wouldn't be possible without an e-bike. So I'm very, very thankful for the invention of electric bikes, and I'm very excited to see it expand to more parts of the region. So
yeah, all bikes are good bikes. That's my thought.
Absolutely. So
electric, acoustic, three-wheeled, two-wheeled. I'm here for all of it. Yeah. Okay, we've got just a few more minutes. Does anybody else have a question before we wrap it up? Oh, thank you for that link, Amy.
if there aren't, one thing I'll just offer while people might be thinking of questions is this, and you don't have to put it in the chat if you know the answer to this, but one thing that I like to ask people who ask about our advocacy work is, do you know who your elected official is? So do you know who your city council member is? Do you know who your mayor is? Do you know who your state house or your state rep is? There's a lot that happens on the Hill in DC, but in terms of a lot of the work that we're doing here, the people who have the most impact on that in terms of decision makers are your city council members and your mayor. And so if you don't know who that is, that's absolutely one good way that you can get started in your own advocacy efforts is, educating yourself about those things, but then meeting with them. City council members, in addition to being much easier to persuade with a smaller number of folks, are also tend to be a lot easier to get in contact with and have a coffee with. And the vast majority of them are very interested in meeting with you, hearing from you, and working with you to make these changes for the community that y'all both call home.
Yeah, I think that's it's good advice, Michael. So the first step would be Google like your city and then city council.
Mhm.
And somewhere on your city website that will pop up. And then I challenge you just to give it a shot and see what happens. Just send an email and say, hey, I'm a resident of your district or whatever it is, and I'd love to meet you with you over coffee to like talk about, I don't know, sidewalks in my neighborhood and just see what happens. I mean, the
Mhm.
worst that they can do is ignore you. So,
And if
and the
they and
best that
if
they can
they
do.
and if they ignore you, let Michael know, and he'll let them know that that's not cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I did
Yeah.
want to say one thing, if I can interrupt, before we wrap up, about the Veronica O. Davis event on April 23rd. We are doing that as a fundraiser for our policy, advocacy, and community planning work. Those are areas that are, much of it we offer to the community pro bono, and it's one of the more difficult areas, but essential areas of our mission, to fund. So there are tiered ticket levels for the Veronica Davis event, a limited number we're doing on Scouts Honor if you can't afford a ticket. We have on scholarship available through the Eventbrite link, and then different ticket prices. I also wanted to add that she has agreed to stay an extra night. And on April 24th, she will be a guest lecturer at UMKC, open to all students and faculty, which will be awesome. So the ticket price also helps us provide books to give out to the students, and to have her stay an extra night and connect with the UMKC students. So I just wanted to put that plug in.
Thank you, Amy. And yeah, so like I said, we're really excited to have Veronica here. Like if you haven't seen her speak in person, she's a really, really great speaker and she really knows her stuff. And thank you to Adam for dropping the link in the chat. If you're trying to find your elected officials, this is one link you can use. Type in your information and it will tell you everyone that you may need to know about. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming. This was truly a delight and exactly the way that I like to spend my afternoons here at Bike Walk. Thank you, Michael, for leading us through that. Like I said, I will send a follow-up email later this week that will include the recording plus the links to resources that we dropped in the chat through here. You all attended today because you are clearly passionate about a brighter future for the Kansas City region. And we are grateful for that because we are too. And with your help, we can claim that possibility and make it a reality for all of us and all of our neighbors. If you are not yet a Bike Walk KC member, I invite you to invest in the work that we're doing together, that redefining our streets as places for people. You can become a Bike Walk KC member. We'll drop the link in the chat and also include it in the follow-up email. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for your commitment to a safer, more connected Kansas City.